Hello everybody, Resonance here, and today I have another expert game for you guys as part of my new Break the Meta series for Age of Empires 2. Throughout this series, I'll be showcasing a wide variety of creative and situational strategies while evaluating how they might stack up in the current metagame. We've all seen our fair share of galley rushes and knights, so today it's time for something completely different. It's time for some mass throwing axemen. In this expert match, Lion will be playing against Wacko in a 1v1 on the map Arena. At the top corner of the map, we have Lion, aka Disclaimer, playing as the Blue Franks. And on the bottom right side of the map, we have Wacko, playing as the Purple Byzantines. One of my viewers, the Massimune, I believe, did end up leaving a comment on one of the previous episodes of Break the Meta, asking me if we could see a replay of the Franks doing something else other than knights. The Franks are generally considered to be a pretty binary civilization in that if you take a look at their bonuses, their farm upgrades are free, their castles are cheaper, and their knights get 20% extra HP. It really does favor the knights. Obviously, the farm upgrades being free is very, very helpful when you're going for food-heavy units like knights. Their, tech tree is not very good. The Franks really only have access to great knights. Their light cavalry is pretty bad. They don't get squires, so their infantry isn't very amazing. They do have a full barracks otherwise, but a lack of squires does hurt them a lot more than you think it would. Their archery range is quite bad without access to Arbalist, and I don't believe they get Bracer either, so the Franks, their unit variety is lacking a little bit. One of their more common late-game army compositions, a very, very powerful one, would be something like hand cannoneers with paladins and maybe bombard cannons. So the Franks do have some good units, of course, but really, the Franks are all about that Knight Rush. That's what they do, man. Especially on a map like Arena, or if you're in the pocket position and whatnot, you're going to be fast castling. You're going to go to the castle age pretty quickly, since it's a lot harder for you to be rushed. Especially on a map like Arena, you start surrounded by stone walls, of course, so feudal age rush is quite difficult. Knights just seem to make sense, But on the flip side, though, the Franks do have other options that are situational. It's sometimes you're in a position where going for knights isn't always the answer. And even though fast castle age is optimal on a map like Arena, knights are not always the way to go. Usually you'll see your opponent either full booming. Full booming is definitely an option. We've seen that before in episode 2, where we saw the Mayans going for a full boom, where they'll, just play super defensively, not build any military until the Imperial Age, and just focus on getting a huge economy out. And usually this is a good idea when you've got the Civ matchup in the late game, and, since you're playing on a map like Arena, and you've got the stone walls, you're not in any danger of being rushed, so you can afford to be that greedy. But the Franks do have other options, and sometimes they're relevant. When we think about it, players will either go for a full boom on Arena, or they'll go for something like monks, backed up with mangonels. The monks are definitely a very good counter to knights, as knights are extremely expensive, and if the monks do get a successful conversion on a knight, it's like killing an opponent's knight, and you get another knight for free, essentially, on top of that. It is ridiculous. It's a very, very cost-efficient way to trade with your opponent, get some value out of your units, and the monks typically make a mockery of those knights. And of course, the monks very, very vulnerable to cheap ranged units like crossbowmen who can just gun down the knights, gun down the monks before the monk can actually get a successful conversion. So mangonels are a great way to support that. Also, monks offer really no offensive presence on their own besides threatening to steal something of theirs, and the mangonels can apply a lot of pressure, threaten to blow down some buildings. So on Arena, you'll see something like a boom, maybe you'll see monks and mangonels. Knights are an option, of course, but you gotta throw in a siege workshop with them, otherwise you're not gonna get through these walls anytime soon. The knight rating is a lot weaker on Arena. It's certainly an option, but it's weaker because you can't get through these walls easily without a siege workshop, so you have other options. We've seen this, right, with the Huns, that Tarkin Rush video that I did. This is definitely a similar case here. And it's all about thinking about the Civ matchup. In this specific case, what can we expect our opponent to do? I mean, he's the Byzantines, so he'll probably go for something along the lines of, monks and mangonels, predicting the knights. The monks are going to be super duper good against that, or he'll just go for a full boom. And, we know that something's up right now because, obviously, a Lion over here does have, the Blue Franks player is going real heavy onto stone. This is a lot more than you would actually need. He's stockpiling this so he can go for a castle. And the reason that this is so good is because the Franks, remember, their castles cost a lot less. They're very, very cheap. So you can actually, set up your economy in a way that you don't have to assign... Ooh, loses the scout here, that kind of sucks. Because now he won't have really like that much map vision, so he won't really know what his opponent's up to. But anyway, as I was saying, since your castle costs so much less as the Franks, believe it or not, throwing axemen are a viable option in this case. Your castle costs so much less, so you don't have to assign as many villagers mining stone that you otherwise normally would if you're any other civilization, so that way you're going to have a much stronger economy. He's setting himself up, so he should be able to just go up to the castle age really, really soon. He's going to do some forced drop-off. He's just a little bit short on the food department. It's going to slow him down a little bit. What a disaster. 798, 801, up to the castle age. Fantastic. He's going to stonewall these relics as well, so his opponent cannot grab them, because he's assuming that the Byzantines is going to go for monks or just a full-on boom. And either way, you're probably going to build a monastery to go pick up those relics, because if you're going for a boom, it's all about that late-game economy, and he wants to deny these relics from his opponent. This is a huge, huge warning sign for our purple Byzantines player, Wacko. When you see your opponent stonewalling up these relics, that means he doesn't want those relics of his own, so he's up to no good here. If he doesn't want these two relics, which are incredibly close to his own base, that means he's not building a monastery, and that means something bizarre is going on right now. Something bizarre is going on. A castle drop, always a very, very potent option on Arena. A castle drop is also another very powerful strategy that we see. Because again, it's all about getting through these walls, right? Like, no matter what you go for, crossbowmen knights or, you know, monks, you have to have a siege workshop thrown in there to get through those walls at a reasonable pace. Or you just gather enough stone that you can send your villagers forward as you're getting real close to the castle age. We're up to about 80% right now. He's going to time this almost perfectly and just start building this castle. This castle will be able to just tear right through these walls. Looks like Wacko, our purple Byzantines player, is up to the castle age. Very, very quick castle time from him. He's going to, again, open with the monastery, and the castle here is going to be really, really potent. He's going to start with his house right now, it looks like. So why throwing axemen in this case? Like, we've all seen, you know, castle drops as something that is certainly viable on Arena, because the castle can apply so much pressure. You can't, like, stonewall behind this anymore, because the castle will gun down those villagers. Monks don't do anything against the castle, neither does Mangonel. It's very hard to deal with. You need a ton of battering rams to be able to deal with that efficiently. It's going to get scouted out here, but remember, monks are only good against units that, generally speaking, cost a ridiculous amount of cash. Like, they're good against converting enemy mangonels, assuming that your guys don't get mangonel down first, and they're good against the knights, assuming that, again, the knights don't charge you and kill you down first, because those units are very, very expensive. He is going to go look for some relics right about now, but they're garbage against a unit like the Throwing Axemen. The Throwing Axemen is a very, very cheap ranged infantry unit. It's very, very interesting. You can think of it as sort of a long swordsman with a little bit of range, but when I put it that way, it sounds terrible, right? But that's the thing. The Throwing Axemen being cheap and terrible is super good in this situation, because the Byzantines player is going to go for a little bit of that monks and mangonel action, expecting, I don't know, like literally anything else other than the mass Throwing Axemen. And the monks aren't really going to be able to convert too many things here. The mangonels, believe it or not, are actually pretty good against Throwing Axemen in general, because Throwing Axemen are actually, like, they're ranged. I mean, they do melee damage, but they have a short range of 3, so when they get all clumped up, the mangonel will be able to just, you know, tear right through them. We can see here right now the example of the castle being able to apply so much pressure, is able to just attack these walls. These walls cannot be reinforced. This villager will help, you know, clear this wall down a little bit faster. Starting to produce Throwing Axemen now. Throwing Axemen hype, as his opponent Wacko is going to try and pick up all these relics, because again, he's trying to boom it out here. I mean, in the late game, you know, it's relatively, you know, this isn't a very, very one-sided matchup compared to, like, the Huns versus Mayans in the late game. Like, the Franks and the Byzantines can definitely duke it out. But the Byzantines, the thing is that their Imperial Age costs less, and this means that, at least in the early Imperial Age, they'll have a huge advantage over the Franks. And this is probably what Lion is thinking. Since the Byzantines are able to get to the Imperial Age first, then that means that Lion is going to be inevitably, he's just going to fall behind in the early Imperial Age, and he doesn't want to have to deal with that deficit, so he wants to go put on some pressure now and try and nullify that bonus that the Byzantines have, as the cheaper Imperial Age can be very, very powerful on a map like Arena, where you need access to things like, you know, gunpowder, bombard cannons. The Franks, since they're trash line, they're units that don't cost gold, really does suck. They only get, like, halberdiers, but they don't get squires, so they're too slow. They don't get hussars, they don't get all their upgrades for the elite skirmishers, so in the super late game, the Byzantines, when the gold's running out, the Byzantines can definitely win that war of attrition, but the Franks do have some tricks up their sleeve. Either way, Lion wants to nullify the fact that the the Byzantines will be able to get to the Imperial Age first and, you know, use that little window. This forward town center is so unfathomably aggressive, but I like it. I like it because it's actually protected by this castle, so he's kind of in the clear here. I've been kind of jumping around a little bit, and I haven't been able to talk too much about why Throwing Axemen in this case don't suck. Another thing about Throwing Axemen is not only are they quite good against monks, and that monks don't get really that much value out of converting them. I mean, in the Castle Age, like, the monks are not very, very powerful, so you have to actually be able to convert something good. It's hard to mass them up, too. But the Throwing Axemen are a unit, like the Tarkin, that have an attack bonus versus buildings. And what this means is that the Throwing Axemen can actually apply a lot of pressure, and the Byzantines don't really have a very straightforward answer to this combination of Siege and Throwing Axemen. Because when it comes to this situation, I'm really curious to see how Wacko will respond. This is a very hard army to deal with. The battering rams obviously do get beaten by the mangonels in this case, so that's another reason why he has the mangonels here to go deal with the inevitable forward siege. But really, like, the Throwing Axemen can kind of just clear out this entire army pretty easily, and the best solution to Throwing Axemen is, generally speaking, something along the lines of, you know, like arbalists, crossbowmen, the hand cannoneers and whatnot, which he doesn't have access to yet. If we take a look at Wacko's perspective, he's actually set up his economy that he might be thinking about going to the Imperial Age really early, and this is something that the Byzantines try to do. But if you put enough pressure on the Byzantines, if they're going for like a fast Imperial Age on Arena, then they're basically screwed. And that's another reason why Blue's going for this strategy here, is because he thinks his opponent's going to go for a fast imp, abuse that little window there, that huge power spike that the Byzantines do get, and he's going to try and punish the crap out of his opponent. And there's really only one thing that can put enough pressure on his opponent to punish him for going for this fast Imperial Age as the Franks. That's a castle drop. And he's going for the Throwing Axemen here because the Throwing Axemen, they are super duper good against the standard defense of the monks and the mangonels. They're super duper good against that. And it looks like he's moving out here with the mangonel to go deal with the opposing mangonels and monks, the double battering rams, and the Throwing Axemen. These villagers are going to get hit quite hard here, but while those mangonels are focusing down the villagers, they are going to get hit with the opposing mangonel. And the battering ram's gonna blow down this monastery. That's really unfortunate because Wacko over here does not have, he went really, really hard in these relics. He got like 3, and when he loses this monastery, it's gonna be a huge chunk to his gold income. This strategy as the Franks is so potent, and less so because of the Throwing Axemen, but more so because their castles cost like literally nothing. So their castle drop is way more threatening than the enemy, and in this specific situation, it's so crazy. Another reason why this is so good is because Blue scouted out that our Purple Byzantines player over here, Wacko, look at his base. He has his main stone and his main gold, the biggest chunks of those, at the front of his base, right up against these walls. So this castle gets so much value. It secures all these resources for himself and denies them from his opponent. So this strategy is less about the Throwing Axemen and more so about the fact that the Franks castles cost almost nothing and you can just keep putting them on. He already has enough stone to be able to build a 3rd castle, and this is sick because he's also denying stone from his opponent and really, really punishing him. As Wacko here up to the Imperial Age, can he defend? I can't wait to see his response here. Because we're kind of at a standstill in this specific situation, and it looks like he's very curiously going for pikemen. This is a really, really weird one. We look at the Throwing Axemen, right? They're actually pretty good against pikemen. They're actually pretty good. They're decent against infantry and melee units in general because they can just kind of mow them all down like an archer could before the melee units actually get there. And in this case, you know, the pikemen have literally 0 melee armor, so the Throwing Axemen will just cut right through them like a knife through butter. And, you know, just be able to focus fire them down, which is something that melee units don't really get the benefit of doing. One of the reasons why the Kameyuk unit for the Incas, that extra long-ranged pikeman, is good is because a pikeman with 1 range means they can focus down cavalry units much, much, much easier, and the ability to focus fire things down gives ranged units just a big advantage in general. All these monks gonna be caught out of position here. They're gonna get cornered by these Throwing Axemen. That's gonna be really bad for Wacko. He's gonna lose all those monks. It's like 500 gold down the drain, and the siege is moving up. This villager here gonna get thwacked in the head by a mangonel shot. 3 mangonels moving up here. It's gonna be a mangonel micro war. All these shots gonna miss. They're gonna be devastating for Wacko. he's going to end up losing all of his mangonels here. They're both going to be trading, but it's 2 mangonels for 3, which definitely favors our blue player. So let's briefly go over yet again why this is super duper good. One, he wants to apply so much pressure against the Byzantines. He's not really super confident in this matchup. He wants to punish his opponent for going for that fast Imperial Age as Byzantines sometimes like to do, or for booming or whatever his opponent's going to do. The Byzantines aren't going to be able to apply too much pressure. In this case, the early game is actually in favor of the Franks because the Franks get to apply so much pressure and deal so much damage with these castles. Since the Franks' castles cost almost nothing, this is a very, very potent strategy, the castle drop. And we take a look at the map. The map is so castle drop favored here. It's always a good idea to go for a castle drop when your opponent's resources are at the front of their base. We see the main gold, the main stone here. Scout that in the early game, consider a castle drop, because getting this little chunk of map control, this zone of defense, is so very powerful. In this case, yeah, like the Throwing Axemen are also quite good, because when you're going for like a fast Imperial Age or something like that, and just in general, you know, you're trying to be a little bit conservative with your food. So, of course, you know, the Byzantines player is going to defend with the very standard monks and mangonels, which is good against most things. It is. It's not really good against the Throwing Axemen. The mangonels are okay against Throwing Axemen, but they don't kill the Throwing Axemen in one hit, unlike the crossbowmen. Throwing Axemen have enough HP, they can kind of tank that shot. And the Throwing Axemen are just such a cheap costing unit, and they're not amazingly powerful that, well, it's okay if they get converted. It really is. Ooh, this is, it looks like he's moving out here, and he kind of has to, because the bombard cannon is going to be a huge power spike for the Byzantines. You're going to see the engagement going on right here. The bombard cannons are just trying to put, like, a constant pressure on these castles, but the Throwing Axemen are going to be able to come out on top here. His opponent's decision, Wacko's decision to go for pikemen is a really, really curious one. And when I'm looking at the situation, I actually kind of understand his logic. I think that he's going for mass pikemen. One, because they're super duper cheap, and he doesn't think he has that many other options. But two, I think he's trying to deny his opponent from going for knights. And I mean, if we take a look at the situation, there actually is a stable over here from Lion. So he was thinking about going for knights at a point, but he can't go for knights. He can't go for knights because of the mass pikemen and a couple monks thrown in here. And the knights are really good for this like slow siege situation. And since the Byzantines are in the Imperial Age, they got those bombard cannons. And Throwing Axemen really suck against something like bombard cannon because you want to like charge down those mangonels and those bombard cannons, but Throwing Axemen are so slow they can't get there in time. The bombards will just kite backwards. The mangonels will just kite backwards and deal damage before you get to do that. That's when cavalry becomes so powerful against that backline siege. Getting a group of knights would be amazing against this army composition, but he can't do it. He is stuck making Throwing Axemen because his opponent is massing pikemen. So we'll see if this gambit pays off, as the pikemen do prevent his opponent from going for knights, which makes these bombards and these mangonels a lot more powerful. This constant pressure being applied to these castles here. He's gonna have to repair this, but it's okay because he's repairing it with stone that's not even his. This is Wacko stone. Lion has stolen all those resources, and he's using it to go kill his opponent, so that's pretty devastating. I like this outpost over here as well, as Blue is using that so that he can see if his opponent is like leaving his base to go mine any exterior resources or try and go set up shop somewhere else or launch like some sort of counterattack. Because the point of a castle drop in this situation is you want to try and box your opponent in. You want to keep your opponent contained in his base, and this outpost ensures that. You know, there's nothing that's going to sneak out through this little gate over there. This outpost will see everything. This battering ram going to move up a little bit prematurely. Throwing Axemen here, very, very strong against battering rams. But it looks like he is going to move forward yet again. The mangonels we can see are decent against these Throwing Axemen. When we take a look at their HP bars here. The thing with the pikeman gambit, and that's why I'm not super sure of this. I mean, I understand it and it has some merits, but the pikemen on their own just kind of suck against Throwing Axemen. The only reason that this fight is like going like somewhat even, I think it's still losing this, but is because the bombard cannons are doing, solid 40 area of effect damage here. You're gonna bop a bunch of those Throwing Axemen in the head. The pikemen just offer like no real offensive presence except against cavalry units. They do like nothing. And he has no blacksmith upgrades on them either. The +2 defense here, if you're going for Throwing Axemen ever, you want to get that defense upgrade, of course, so that they take less damage from attacks, and that means that the pikemen do a whopping 2 damage on hit. That's really, really weak until he gets blacksmith upgrades. And since they have no defense either, the Throwing Axemen are going to just eat right through them. Bombard cannons here are the ace in the hole in the situation. Will they pay off? Because again, the Franks player can't get to these bombards safely. there's this back line of siege that he can't get to, and he can't make knights because of these pikemen. Still, though, I can't help but wonder if, like, I mean, I know that going for something like crossbowmen is incredibly weak to the mangonels that the Franks have access to, but the crossbowmen are super duper good against the throwing axemen. Skirmishers also a thought, but I guess skirmishers are too easily countered by the mangonels, so I understand the thought process behind the pikemen. I guess he feels like he doesn't have too many options, but he's really, like, boxed into the corner. Like, Wacko's eco here is really, really weak. In fact, both players actually have a really, really small economy for this stage in the game. Wacko's economy very, very imbalanced. What he needs to do is he needs to, like, get out some town centers, like, or just transition, like, half his lumberjacks, like, onto farms or something like that. Yeah, he's running into the bane of every arena player's existence, where you're boxed this far in a corner, and well, you're not dead yet, and you're doing fine. Ooh, some sick mangonel shots here, actually. This funnel that he's created with his buildings forces these throwing axemen to clump up, even though he wants them in staggered formation, so the mangonel AoE shots kill less dudes. This little funnel right there forces him to lose so many of them. Yeah, like, he's running out of space to build. When you're getting contained, it's a bane of every arena player's existence. When you're being pressured so hard and there's nowhere to build, you run out of places to build houses. So he's getting housed here for a very extended period of time. This strategy is so potent because the Franks, just their castles are so cheap. So cheap. And this is actually remarkably difficult to deal with when you back it up with siege weapons. It is. Ideally, you know, something like hand cannoneers and bombarded cannons would be amazing in this situation, but our opponent can't go for that because he got pressured so hard. This is only working, though, because the map was just so strong for a castle drop. Like, both of Wacko's main minerals, the stone, the main gold, are at the front. Now they're being mined by his opponent. Devastating. Absolutely devastating. Because they're at the front, the castle just secures so much map control. The bombard cannons, though, are doing some serious work. That early Imperial Age is going to take this castle out, and is finally going to pay off and stop his opponent from being able to advance that castle line further forward, inch by inch. He's always trying to get those castles, like, slightly in range of each other so they can all defend the bases of each other. But yeah, the bombard cannon siege line slowly moving forward. Level 1 defense upgrade, I like this. It's going to make them a lot better against the throwing axemen. Another reason, I guess, why the pikemen is interesting here is because the throwing axemen, if they focus fire down the bombards, they have to, like, wade through an army of pikemen, and the pikemen will get to do a lot of damage over time here. Bombard cannons are actually decent against these throwing axemen because they're, like, slow enough and they do enough AoE damage that you can really just do a number on these. The mangonels here are also quite good. I understand the pikemen. I think that the pikeman is like a preemptive thing. His army comp is so weak to something like knights or light cavalry. So incredibly weak because almost all of his money is invested in bombard cannons and mangonels that the knights would just be devastating. You just charge them down. Another thing with the pikemen that's interesting is that they're so cheap for the Byzantines. They cost like nothing. While they're pretty bad against the throwing axemen. Throwing axemen do kind of counter them. The pikeman forces the throwing axemen to actually bunch up and take a lot more damage from the area of effect shots from the bombard cannons and the mangonels. And yet again, it looks like blue pushed back. Lion cannot get the killing blow here. He's boxed his opponent. His opponent, by the way, has so much wood. Should be selling out the market or something, but he's running out of space to build. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have a lot more farms. Both players here incredibly crippled, but it looks like Wacko is actually pulling ahead a little bit in the economy department, and Lion, the blue Franks player, is a little bit behind. He was very all in on this. I mean, he spent so much of his resources in throwing axemen. The tech advantage is really starting to bite him in the butt. You know, I guess the pikeman thing, I mean, it might seem ridiculous, but it's just garbage his opponent has to deal with. It's garbage that, like, makes those throwing axemen clump up and limits the Franks player's options. So, new meta, guys. The pikemen, while they're not the counter to throwing axemen, it's all about the mind games. He's trying to force his opponent into making throwing axemen, which are actually suboptimal in this case because of the bombard cannons. Like, the throwing axemen just can't get up to those bombard cannons safely, and the pikemen force them all to clump up so that the mangonel shot's going to do damage. Since the pikemen cost so little, I guess he can just force his, like, it's okay to trade really inefficiently there. Throwing axemen are also a pretty good unit to actually castle drop on your opponent, depending on their civ matchup, of course. It's actually a pretty good unit because they can apply so much pressure like the Tarkan can. They can, like, focus fire down some buildings and just, you know, blow up everything if your opponent is not really prepared. But the thing here, though, is that like, blue's not really doing the pressure anymore. It's all coming from Wacko. Like, blue is the one who's being forced to respond, and look at him. He's trying to get those bombard cannons, but he can't do it. And the pikemen, in the meantime, are just stabbing away. Those bombard cannons kiting backwards, and look at how clumped these throwing axemen are now because they're all stuck around those pikemen. They're gonna get mowed down by these bombards. Oh my goodness, this is actually super cool. And yeah, here comes the skirmishers. And skirmishers are a little bit better against the throwing axemen because, again, they have no armor. It's not amazing, but, you know, it's cheap. And we're looking for the value game here because the map control is so much in favor of Lion, our blue Franks player. There's like running out of resources. Like, Wacko has 1 gold mine left, and it's really, really tiny. He has only 1 gold mine left, and really, like, he has to save his money for siege weapons. And Wacko is playing exactly like my favorite playstyle. I love this. He's going for the value game. He's got that trash and siege units. He's got the skirmishers. He's got the pikemen. Sure, they don't really do that much against the bulk of your opponent's army, but they trade efficiently. They cost efficiently. You're not wasting any gold. You get to funnel all the bombard cannons in. It's really hard for his opponent to actually answer these bombard cannons. Like, these guys are literally just meat shields, essentially, is a good way to think about it. They're just filler. They're not really the actual threat here. And the castle drop thing, oh, it's just so brutal when your opponent manages to turn it around here. Like, the throwing axemen are a really good unit for snowballing a game because when you're the one pressuring your opponent and blowing up, they can threaten to blow up buildings, right? That's what the whole point of throwing axemen like Tarkins are, is they can threaten to blow up buildings really, really well. And when you're not able to go for any buildings and you have to fight hand-to-hand combat, the throwing axemen start to suck a little bit more. Such a huge army here from Wacko. Will he be able to hold this? He's just going to clear out these castles. And, well, this is a huge waste of stone for blue. It's not blue stone that's being wasted, so I guess it's okay. Stealing all these relics, actually, is a great idea. Go grab those relics and escape because he's on a clock right now. There's no way that Lion can actually hold all of these defensive castles, so he's got to, like, get all of his stuff out while he can. Unit pathing OP, though. This monk is struggling to escape from these walls. Can he get out? Like, he really wants to just, like, blue's banking on the fact that purple has wasted, like, okay, like, he has, like, no resources left, essentially. Like, blue's trying to, like, mine all the resources left from purple and just kind of starve him in a war of attrition. Because purple just doesn't have the resources. I mean, he's forced to make all these halberdiers and all these skirmishers. Notice how he gets fletching the ranged upgrades for his range units first, the defense ones for the melee units, so that they can, you know, take less damage from those ranged attacks, get up there, and actually do more damage. And for the ranged units, it's really important that you get the first shot off and have a little bit extra range. Well, these battering rams moving up here, but, you know, really, like, the throwing axemen, they lose in this value game versus all these mass trash units. Like, the throwing axemen are supposed to be a counter to most trash units, but really, like, he can't get out enough of them. They cost almost nothing for the Byzantines. And, like, during this time, like, sure, there's so many losses for Wacko. Wacko's losing units like crazy. But his units don't really, like, he can afford to lose these because these bombard cannons just gonna kite backwards. They gotta keep kiting backwards. And this is so very efficient. Wacko making every little bit of gold go a mile. Look at the saturation on this gold mine. It's insane. He's trying to get as much value as he can out of every single bit of resources on his opponent's side of the map. Because every little bit of stone that he mines and every little bit of gold that he mines from his opponent is also stuff that he's taking away from his opponent. Oh, look at that frame rate for a second there. All right, we're good to go, guys. The bombard cannon's going to move a little bit further forward. Another reason why this is so very devastating for our blue player here is that, like, he's still in the Castle Age, right? And Wacko is in the Imperial Age, so he has access to bombards, but blue sure doesn't. Lion needs to get to the Imperial Age right now, and he's invested so much in these throwing axemen. He's clicked up now, but all that stuff that he spent on throwing axemen, all that food and gold, is going to delay his Imperial Age, slow him down. We've reached this stage in the game, and this happens when where castle drop doesn't kill your opponent, and this is normal. Like, sometimes your castle drop won't kill your opponent. And now the win condition has changed. It's no longer about killing his opponent. It's about that value game. It's about the fact that his opponent is missing so many resources from his own base. Like, Wacko's missing a stone mine. He's missing, like, half his gold. In fact, Wacko's been basically denied all of his stone entirely. He might not even be able to get a castle up at all unless he buys stone from the market. We're looking at the value game here. The map control is still thoroughly in favor of blue. He has to stall till he gets to the Imperial Age and hope that the fact that he has stolen all the resources off the map is enough to carry him to victory. Because right now the tables have turned. The tempo in the other favor. Purple, move the line forward. Slow and steady. This is what I love. That slow siege push here is so good against this castle drop pressure. The slow siege push. Lion is responding very, very appropriately in this case. He's noticed that, you know, there's no way he's actually going to be able to finish this gold mine. So he mined as much as he could. He stole as much gold as he could, and now he's just going to lame it and cover it in stone walls to prevent his opponent from mining it. The good news is, though, for Wackos, he is just going to be able to, you know, open this up with his bombard cannons incredibly easily. Look at this trash and siege, boys. Welcome to Resins 22's metagame. We got a new meta here, and it's all about the value. The value game in the late game, though, is probably going to favor the Byzantines, as the Franks don't really get very good trash. I mean, while they have, like, amazing paladins and hand cannoneers and bombards, if the Byzantines can survive it, then they win. And the thing here, though, is that the fact that the Franks have, like, the stronger, I guess, like, post-Imperial Age, as long as they have gold, doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't, because the Franks are so far behind in the Imperial Age that we're almost already in that, like, ultra late game scenario. There's no power spike from your super OP paladins, hand cannoneers, and bombards. That doesn't exist anymore. Too slow to the Imperial Age because of all the throwing axemen. This was extremely effective, though. Even though it's not really doing too much now, like, I cannot stress enough how much damage this actually did. It's hard to quantify from looking at this specific game, but the fact that he went for throwing axemen instead of something else meant he got to apply so much pressure with all those forward castles. So very much pressure. And rob his opponent of so much resources. It's something that is not super tangible. You can't really see it, but that's like thousands of resources down the drain. That's so much stone gone, so much gold gone, all that map control. Like, Purple was slowed down so much. Wacko has lost almost everything, but he's back in this because the throwing axemen running out of steam and not able to deal with those bombards. So the pikemen might have seemed insane, considering that, you know, there's no mounted units here. The pikemen offer no offensive presence, but in this case it really pays off. Forces his opponent to, you know, go for something suboptimal in this case, which is continuing in the throwing axemen department, not being able to go for knights. It protects those bombard cannons, and it's okay that the halberdiers, like, are really suck, because they're just there for meat shields to protect the important units in the back. Like I said, this is going to get opened up, and this gold mine now belongs to him, and this is super important for Wacko, as every penny is precious at this point in the game. Moving up there with the siege rams, elite throwing axemen. Now this is better. The tech advantage was something that was really screwing with Lion, but elite throwing axemen are super good against trash units. The bigger problem, though, is that the line is slowly going to inevitably move forward here without proper answers to these bombard cannons. He's going to need something like a mangonel. He's going to need, like, his own bombard cannons to answer these bombard cannons from his opponent. Because while the throwing axeman is good against all these trash units, it's super good against the halberdiers, and it's okay against the skirmishers. It's okay. It's not going to be enough, and it's also not a very efficient engagement to take either. So he's just piling on the throwing axemen. This is a fairly even fight, but the siege in the back is just not going to be able to get touched, whereas these capped rams are not going to make it in. So the value game in favor of the Byzantines right now. Throwing axemen still going to chop through these guys. I mean, skirmishers are okay against elite throwing axemen because they have no armor, but skirmishers are also, like, these aren't technically archers. We can see how little damage the throwing axemen takes, even though they have 0 ranged armor. Throwing axemen putting on some serious damage here. Gonna actually clean this up a little bit. And that's because he has the elite throwing axemen upgrade. He's got the bearded axe, Frank's unique technology that's gonna add additional range onto these throwing axemen, which will help so much against the skirmishers and bombard cannons. And elite throwing axemen are infinitely better than the castle age throwing axemen. This just goes to show, and part of the point of the series is to show you guys that there are very few, like, strictly bad units or strategies in AoE2. Just things are situationally incredibly good, and sometimes thinking outside the box is exactly what you need. Get an advantage, or in this case, get the situation turned on you. Your opponent knows how to respond, and that's the mark of a really good player, is someone who is able to deviate from the very standard play and adapt to a bizarre, novel situation. Like Wacko over here. I feel like most players would have been screwed really hard in this situation, have no idea to respond to these throwing axemen. Like, I guess if, you know, he went, like, really heavy on the skirms or crossmen just to counter the throwing axemen, I guess he recognizes that the bigger threat in the army was actually the siege weapons from the Franks players, so by going for halbs instead, which seems insane. He denies the cavalry, he has like a cheap meat shield in the way, and he also makes it so his opponent's mangonels don't really get that much of an easy target. Like, the mangonels would be so good against the skirms. I suppose that something like light cavalry or knights would have been an option, but he's thinking about being conservative with his gold, and I feel like a lot of players would have panicked in this situation. Oh, there we go, there's the counter bombard cannon! I dig it! That's exactly what he needs to win this game, is he needs bombard cannons to deal with his opponent's bombard cannons. Hand cannoneers have counter that Wacko has needed, but he didn't have enough gold in the early game to be able to heavily commit to those. He's going to throw them in, they're going to be great here. Champions, I also like this choice. It might be too little too late, though, because while the champions are extremely good against all these trash units, they are a hard counter to halberdiers and quite good against the skirmishers. It might be too little too late because the hand cannoneers are coming up. But Wacko is running out of gold. This is so very close. Another problem with the trash units here, which isn't relevant in this situation, is that they suck at raiding so hard and they can't apply any pressure, but they're able to slowly move the line forward and win that value game. And if we take a look at the gold, well, both players here pretty darn poor. It looks, though, that Lion definitely has the cash advantage here. Two-handed swordsmen are being produced, but is the champion upgrade actually coming? I don't really know if champions is even being researched in this case. Okay, there we go. Champion is being researched. He's going to need it because two-handed swordsmen are a really crappy unit, and champions are infinitely better. Siege Rams moving forward. This is such a close match. It's very difficult to tell who's going to come out on top in this case, but if he didn't go for Throwing Axemen, he wouldn't have like done enough damage that this wouldn't have even been possible. Like, this situation wouldn't have been possible. He probably would have like lost to the fast imp. Yeah, we've seen already how much trouble it is responding to the fast Imperial Age from the Byzantines if you're playing against the Franks. Like, imagine how much trouble he would have had if the Byzantines player was like completely undisturbed and was able to just get to the Imperial Age and get out those bombard cannons. Yeah, he would have been able to get the pikemen so much easier, but with such a weak economy, it has actually kept Lion in the game. He's going real hard on the champions. I love it. Champions, also a unit that is actually very, very good in the right situation, and against the mass trash units, they're amazing. And Wacko doesn't have the gold to go for hand cannons, which he needs so very badly in this case. The shoe, once again, on the other foot. And really, like, Age of Empires in the super late game generally boils down to, like, mind games. It's like a game of chess, where each player here is trying to think a little bit ahead and figure out what their opponent is doing and respond with the appropriate unit. And in this case, like, we can see like the tempo that you gain from being able to swap into the correct counter unit after your opponent has committed so hard into a specific army comp. The skirmishers and the halberdiers did so much damage to that Throwing Axemen siege combination, but now they're getting countered by the champions, and it's up to Wacko to respond by switching into something else. But he's committed so much into this, and he actually doesn't have that much of a choice. Looks like these units all boxed in here, man. I'm sure that's happened to all of us. Any Age of Empires player will understand when you accidentally box your own units in. Usually it's your villagers that are building your houses that get boxed in by your own houses, but in this case, all these units going to spawn inside here. That kind of sucks. You won't be able to pull them back without deleting one of these buildings. Oh man, Tetris gone awry. Blocks do not fit. Game's still going on here though. Remarkably close. He's gonna have to pull back a little bit. The Hussar choice from the Byzantines is, I think, a pretty good option. I don't think he really had the eco to go for those in the earlier on, and I don't think they're as good of a meat shield as the pikemen are in terms of cost efficiency, because they don't even cost less for the Byzantines. Like, that's what makes this so much better. But we do need light cavalry here. Wacko needs light cavalry to be able to push out these bombard cannons. The shoe's on the other foot, guys. Look at these bombards doing some serious damage with the champions and the Throwing Axemen. They're OP. There's a new meta in town, and it has nothing to do with knights as the Franks. I think this is like the first Franks game I've seen in forever in which there's not a single knight made. Ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. A Franks game with no knights being made. Man, Age of Empires is a weird game. But that's what's kept it so interesting after, so long. This game might be absolutely ancient, but there's just so much room for freedom and innovation, despite no balance patches, which I think is absolutely crazy. These light cavalry are all about focusing down these bombards, but he's going to need a lot more of them. Oh, this is such a close game. Trash line moving forward. Byzantines Hussars kind of suck. He's going to need to actually get the Hussar upgrade, but he doesn't have enough cash. They kind of suck because no bloodlines. I think they're missing the blast furnace upgrade as well. Yes, they are. And that's what I mean, like, with the Franks having, like, a slight edge in that Imperial Age where you have a lot of gold. at that phase in the game, because the Imperial Age goes through a couple phases. There's like the early import, you don't have all your upgrades yet, you're still transitioning, getting all your technologies like Paladin and whatnot. There's that early Imperial Age, which favors the Byzantines, because they always get there first. Then there's like that post-Imperial Age thing. Once you've got all your upgrades and units and you have gold, you can still afford them. That would favor the Franks, because the Franks have full upgrades on their Paladins, which is such an insanely strong unit. They get, yeah, their Paladins are insane. They're the strongest in the game. They might not get Bloodlines, but their 20% extra HP is actually better than Bloodlines, and it's free. The Franks also get access to hand cannoneers and bombard cannons and champions and whatnot, which are super duper awesome. But the Franks, what they really suck is in that post-Imperial Age, the final phase of the game, with no gold, which we're slowly inching towards. We're slowly inching towards that phase of the game where players don't have any gold resources left, and it's post-Imperial Age and they have all their upgrades. That's when the Franks fell apart, because their trash units really do suck. They can't really go for, you know, like, they don't get Hussars, they get light cavalry without bloodlines, they don't get squires in their halbs, but their halbs are okay, and they don't get brazier for their skirms, so, bleh, pretty bad. But it looks like, though, that Wacko is, believe it or not, going to collapse at the last minute, is finally going to call it quits and resign here. Super close, but the decision to transition into champions was huge, and the elite throwing axeman is so much better, so very much better than the regular throwing axeman unit. It is a massive upgrade. Once you get the bearded axe, that extra attack, HP, armor, I think they even have a faster attack rate, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. It's pretty big, and in this case, it might have seemed like the throwing axeman failed, because he did lose all those castles, right? He lost all of his castles almost. And he got pushed back really hard. It might have seemed like it was actually kind of a failure, but that is not the case, because the reason that Blue was able to come out so much on top here is because he stole all these resources from Wacko. He got to mine everything out of Wacko's base, leave him completely out to dry. And without any of those resources, like, it took too long for Wacko to be able to push this out. He wasn't able to push this out in time because there were just so many castles, because the Franks could just spam them non-stop, throwing axemen create, you know, pretty quickly, and they're just able to do so much damage there. Like, the fact that he got pushed back was basically irrelevant in the late game, because all the damage had already been done. He'd stolen all the resources from here, and he'd stolen so much map control that he was able to turn it around by transitioning to the right amount of units, the right types of units, and Wacko just ran out of cash. He did not have enough cash to transition into whatever he needed to win this game. So, yeah, like, GG, well played here from Lion and Wacko. This was a really awesome game, and look at the end game resources, guys. That tells the entire story. Look at all this cash. The fact that the golden stone are at the front, of course, also made the castle dropping extra potent. And even though he got pushed back, if it wasn't for the castle drops, the mass castles with mass throwing axemen, this would not have been possible. And even though he got pushed back, the damage was done. There's a lot of value in them that's actually quite difficult to quantify just by looking at the battles. We can only see it in the late game, where it really pays off. Let's check out the achievements, boys. As Wacko does end up getting defeated. You know, those meat shields, the halberdiers and the skirmishers, you know, you're obviously going to have a lot more units lost than units killed in that case, but like a much bigger army. The issue is here, though, is that when they're, like, super hard countered by something like champions and you don't have any gold for hand cannoneers, then you are in big trouble. Big trouble. Like, you're generally okay when it comes to the trash units if your opponent doesn't have, like, a really straightforward, easy answer to them. And that's why when I go for, like, the trash and siege combo, trash units, of course, are units that don't cost gold. The hussar unit, the halberdier, and the elite skirmishers. They're the units that you build in the late game. They're called trash units because they're pretty much trash except against things that use except against the things they counter. That's why I like to throw in hand cannoneers usually, because champions are so very good against that army, and when you don't want the cavalry and whatnot like charging at your siege weapons either. Hand cannoneers super duper important against dealing with those close range units. I like to throw in hand cannoneers, and we see that Wacko definitely had the same idea, which was the right idea in this case. He went for hand cannoneers, but he didn't have enough gold because the throwing axemen ate it all up. And another thing, though, is, of course, when you're going for, more expensive non-trash related units, you always want to be scaling your economy to meet your needs. And in this case, Blue needed to have a much bigger economy than Wacko did to support his more expensive units. But Wacko could get away with the tinier one. We can see the discrepancy in the army size here. It's important as well that you scale your economy to meet your needs, because if Wacko had the same size economy, he would have been like floating so many resources, and his units don't win one-on-one, so he needs to have more of them, and they're all about protecting those bombard cannons. But when your bodyguards just get mowed down by champions and elite throwing axemen, that's not good enough. So this is a really crazy back and forth, long game. I think in general, besides this one and the last one, which were a little bit lengthy, I'll try and keep this series just a wee bit shorter. But these two games were pretty long and epic, and there was too much going on for me to skip through. Let me know, guys. Of course, as always, I really appreciate your feedback. I value it immensely, and the positive reception has overall been fantastic. And yeah, it helps motivate me to keep pumping these out, and this is a lot of fun for me too. I'm really, really thankful that Cision and the rest of the AOC box team were able to give me all their archives so I could get access to all these really, really fun replays. I don't have a replay for everything, obviously, so I can't show you every strategy under the sun, as not all of them have happened, but there's a lot of really, really cool stuff on the way as well. I have a lot of these left over. I don't know if I'll be able to show you too much in the realm of something like a... well, we've already seen a pseudo-petard rush. You won't see mass forward universities. I'll put it that way. Maybe it's a thing. Who knows? All right, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed watching this video, leave a like, rating, a comment, whatnot. It helps so much with exposure. It's a great way to show your support. And of course, if you enjoyed this, I've got plenty of other Aoe2 videos on my YouTube channel. I also live stream regularly on Twitch TV. Everything you need and more is in the video description below. So you just go underneath there. You can go watch the other episodes. Head on over to my Twitch page. I'd love to have you. So much fun to interact with all of you guys, and I'll see you all next time. GG, well played. This was a fun one, man. Throwing Axemen, a unit that most people will tell you is pretty bad, but we just saw a Frank's game, guys, where there were literally 0 knights. No knights. It was a great, great game to watch. GG. And I'll see you all next time.